Okay, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Web3 Native Podcast. And today we have Seb from Zapper, one of my favorite products in crypto. So welcome, Seb. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I can see we're really in a chill mood right now, outside and, rocking the cap. I really love the kind of sporty look that we have as opposed to all the other previous podcasts. It was all really serious and like in the room. Yeah, I feel we're
Yeah,
chilling
I mean
outside.
it's DeFi versus traditional finance. It's also I'm based in Montreal. It's pretty warm right now, so kind of have to dress for the weather.
Yeah, yeah. As you say, we tailor it according to whatever the situation suits us, right?
Yep.
So let's jump right into it. So I love to start with like a quote that actually we see on Zapper's platform, which is DeFi is complicated, right? But it doesn't have to be. So in that context, would you like to start off with a quick intro of what Zapper is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Zapper is a dashboard that allows people to easily track their portfolio in DeFi. They can also easily do investments in various DeFi opportunities from ranging from a bunch of like, I'd say like the general actions you can do in DeFi. So lending, adding liquidity to pools, yield farming, also swapping. So it's really like this hub where you could do most of what is possible in DeFi without having to leave to use any different interfaces. We also support a bunch of different chains. So uh, most of our focus has been on Ethereum, but we have support for Polygon. We have support for Phantom. We have support for Binance Smart Chain. We try to be as agnostic in terms of the protocols or chains we support, um, and try to capture DeFi activity there.
Awesome. There's so much to dive into because there's so many aspects of Zapper that make it a one-stop shop, right? But before we go there, should we just kind of like take a step back and start from the beginning? How did Zapper start? Because before this, I understand actually was kind of two different companies and it merged together, and there was some shuffling going on.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an interesting story because I I never had the intent initially to like start a company or a DeFi product. So um, I was always really passionate about finance, but I studied in finance, but traditional finance was really never my thing. I decided to learn how to code, and it was kind of later you know in 2017 that I really caught interest with Ethereum and started to I actually realized that finance and code could actually live together because to me they were these two separate things that really had nothing to do with each other. And so to me, to be able to apply creativity to finance was really interesting. And so 2019 started to participate in a bunch of DeFi communities. They were really small at that time, so like Synthetics had a few members in there. It feels like it was like a small village. Everyone kind of knew each other by name almost. And What was interesting with Synthetics is that a lot of their incentives, so they were really like the OG yield farming yield farmers because one of their incentives was to actually create more synths. So basically, you could take one of their synthetic assets and pool it on Uniswap, and then be able to earn more SNX, which is their native token. And so the first use case for Zapper at that time was called DefiSnap, was really just to be able to track Uniswap and synthetics in one dashboard. Um, and so one day, I think it was like a year and a half ago, feels like 5 years ago, I just posted the link in the Synthetics Discord and got a decent amount of traction from there. People were like, "Oh, could you add Aave? Could you add Compound?" And it kind of never stopped. And through there, I met Nodar and Suhail, which were building DeFi's app at the time. And so if you look at the state of our two products, right, I was building DefiSnap, which was really just tracking your assets, no transactional side to it at all. And Nodar and Suhail were building DeFi Zap, which was, a way for you to enter pools in one transaction, right? You could go from ETH to the ETH synthetic ETH pool without having to, have the correct proportion of the two assets. And yeah, we started talking, and eventually, to me, it became very clear that both products were very aligned, right? Because DefiSnap was making DeFi easy to track, and DefiSnap was making it easy to use, like on the transactional side. So we wanted to consolidate both the read and write functions of DeFi in one place. And so in April, we decided to merge. So DefiSnap plus DeFi Zap, and we rebranded to Zapper and launched it on May 1st. And initially didn't have a lot of traction, but as some of you are well aware, in June when Comp was launched, that's what kicked really the yield farming craze, so the DeFi summer. And Zapper was uniquely positioned to kind of capture yield farming activity, because when you do yield farming, what you do is you go into a pool and you stake that pool token to earn tokens. And that was something we captured. So we did everything from tracking your yield farming to actually doing the investment itself. So we were able to grow a lot from that. And we raised the seed round in August, reached 1 billion in transaction volume on Christmas Day. So yeah, I mean, today we raised our Series A, 15 million, with Long Hash participating, and we've also reached $4 billion in transaction volume. So a bit long-winded answer, but yeah, that's a summary of how we started, where we are right now.
No worries. Yeah, it's amazing, right? To come to where we are right now, how far we've come, and it's also fascinating to hear about kind of like the first informal M&A in crypto from the early days, right? I'm just a bit curious. This is a bit of a side question, but how did you decide on like Zapper as the name then, right? Was it like they were the dominant force, or like because somebody had to compromise which name to take?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I know that personally I didn't like the name DefiSnap, um, and I really liked DeFi Zap. Like just the Zap part, I thought it was cool. It had a nice brand to it, and even like people were using the term Zap a lot. So
Mm.
I think it was just really DeFi Zap had a stronger brand, and it was already. I mean, both were fairly well known when we launched,
Mm.
but for us, it was like, what what feels like the better brand, and we just went for the Zap part, and instead of having DeFi next to Zap to it, we just called it
Yeah.
Zapper. I don't remember why, but I think we wanted to remove the DeFi part because everyone was using DeFi in their name, and we kind of wanted to be unique and to have like
Mm.
a Aave or Compound or Synthetics, and not be DeFi something, right? So
Mm.
for us, it was important to kind of have that unique name.
Yes, it is really catchy, right? Like Zapper has a certain zing to it, and I couldn't imagine if other
Yeah.
protocols are called like DeFi Aave or DeFi Compound.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's funny because
Yeah.
I think it was DeFi Dad. Actually, I was listening to a podcast on branding, and he said the person in the podcast said that often, like the brands that stick the most from a study, I don't remember exactly where, brands that start with a Z and have like a double consonant in their name, like and for us it's, well, Z, and there's the two P's, so Zapper. So kind of funny, we kind of like just stumble on that, but yeah, it is very catchy.
Yes. Well, here we are. So now that everybody thinks of like Zaps as probably like the core feature of Zapper, right, where you can easily enter into pools, yield farm, lend out, claim, all of it is kind of like with one transaction, so to speak, right? So would you like to kind of just walk us through each of the products, starting from maybe like the dashboard, exchange, the pool, the farm, the bridge. There's so many aspects to it. Like, why did we choose to build these specific products, and maybe kind of like priorities or sequencing?
Yep, it's a really good question. And for some people from the outside, sometimes it might seem a bit like random in terms of the features we add, but it's very calculated in the sense that we look at what's the general activity in DeFi, what people are actually doing, and we try to build something for them to make it easier to actually do. Because so the number one product that everyone uses on Zapper is tracking their portfolio. That's really the number one use case for people using Zapper. And then after that, there's like this, I guess, this life cycle of people using Zapper. They start tracking their portfolio, and then they'll do exchange, they'll add liquidity, or maybe they'll bridge. But if we look at the different products, yeah, number one, tracking portfolio. After that, our exchange started being like the second most used feature. Then we have the pools, and lastly, we have the farming. So we also have bridge that's used. I don't know, like if it's used more than farming. I guess I'll have to check the numbers, but initially Zapper was really just the pools and tracking your portfolio, but we saw that it exchanged quickly. I mean, it's a core, element of DeFi. People something do more often than add liquidity to pools, and so yeah, I mean, it's the second most used feature on
Mm,
Zapper, and
mm,
the one that will be coming very soon is lending. So it's been probably one of the most requested features. It's also probably, and you can weigh in on this, probably the most relatable thing for people entering the space, right? Everyone knows what
mhm.
lending is. Not everyone knows what adding liquidity to a pool is, and what that, what's the, impact of that. And so for us, it's important to add that because it's usually the first thing that someone does in DeFi. Like uh, before I used synthetics when I entered DeFi, like the first thing I used was Compound, and it was just like I don't remember if it was DAI or USDC or maybe ETH that I loaned. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I mean that's kind of the way we see the product.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because they're so often, right, in DeFi or in crypto, people just kind of think an idea is cool and you just want to build it because like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this, right? What I'm hearing from
Yeah,
you is that, these are what people want to use and this is what people are
yeah,
doing already the most. And we're just making it so much easier for them to do it. And this kind of like listening to the users and iterating and expanding based on that. I wonder whether for the cross chain as well, we kind of hold a similar philosophy, right? Because I see, of course, now Zapper covers, BSC, right? Polygon, Optimism, Phantom. I thought like there was a little bit of a curveball, like how come there's Phantom in there, compared to the usage and say Optimism versus zero knowledge and things like. How did you pick these then?
it was really. I mean, if our users ask or community asks, we'll do it, and we had a lot of demand for Phantom, and so we added it. Also, like we back in March, we spent like I think a month or two rebuilding Zapper uh, from the ground up to be EVM agnostic. So we changed all the infrastructure on the back to make it easy for us to add new chains. So Phantom was probably like a weekend, uh, a side project on the weekend that we did to add it. So it is much easier for us to add new chains uh, if they're EVM compatible.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So focusing on the EVM compatible kind of architecture sounds like basically
Yep.
we also not only we build like with user feedback, but also with the kind of mindset that we want to build something that is then easily scalable across different protocols, different blockchains, and from there scale up much faster.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Yeah.
like eventually what we see is that you add a chain on Zapper and it makes the pools for that chain available, tokens for exchanging on that chain available, farming, kind of all these things auto populate. We're still not there yet, but we're getting there. We have the first part, which is we add a new chain and you're able to exchange pretty quickly, but there's still things on our side rough around the edges to kind of automate that process.
So I guess the next thing to kind of sequentially across what you're building as well, as we have so many more DeFi. Like initially when we started off, it was just like synthetics, and then you had Maker and Compound, and like things were easier back then, right? Only a few products, and you just need to know these, and you're good to go. Nowadays there are like so many more farms and so many exchanges. So I guess that's partially why there's now a Learn Zapper as well, right? Where basic concepts need to be explained, and even like an alpha leak feature for new projects. So where are we headed with Learn? Why did we start it for education? Does it work as curation, education, and where to go from here?
Yeah, the number one focus of Zapper Learn is really education. And I was talking about designers, and a topic of debate is how much do you actually abstract DeFi, right? Or crypto in general. And most designers have landed on you have to abstract it as much as possible. You almost have to hide away that you're using DeFi. And you've seen products like Dharma. There were a few like that you would just put in money and the money would just like increase. And I was always against that, and I'll explain why. Um, for us, if we're talking about DeFi and we're talking about what we want to see in the world in the future, I actually prefer to see a world where people are more financially literate. And it's no wonder that traditionally people aren't interested in finances because we haven't been investing in education, in financial education for the past 50, 60 years plus. So it's no wonder that today, people are like, oh, I'll just have someone trust my money and I'll just, wait in 40 years and retire. We're seeing a trend right now that actually people are much more interested in finance than what you imagine. Just like GameStop and even just the meme coins, right? It's just showing a trend of people getting themselves interested. And obviously, people are going to make mistakes, but I much rather, have a future where people are actually taking an active part in their, finance than not. Because if you have a world where, you have people investing money and maybe it's DeFi in the back, right? They don't know. Well, you're kind of reproducing the centralized trust institutions of the past. So you're kind of rebuilding traditional finance. And to me, DeFi has always been about increasing the bandwidth of communication for basically how humans, communicate value. Like to me, finance at its core is how we communicate value. And just like the, internet helped people broadcast themselves, through podcasts, through YouTube channels, I think DeFi is going to do the same through finance. It increases their bandwidth in terms of how they can communicate value to the world, broadcast value to the world. And the same reason, someone in another country can, lend money in Compound or Aave and do all the complicated stuff in DeFi too. So for us, that's really important to take part in that and actually, build the future we want to see in the future and not abstract away. And also kind of something coming with the abstraction kind of debate is that people will always ask questions as to where the money is coming from. And if you don't explain it, you're kind of going back at explaining how crypto works, right? If I look at Dharma or the other products that were doing that in the past, by the way, they're not doing that anymore. They kind of learned a lot from that. What they noticed is that users actually were asking questions and were curious about how Dharma was making money, so how their money was increasing. And so we kind of ended up teaching them about DeFi anyway. And so, no, I mean, it's important to be transparent and explain. And as I said, yeah, build the future you want to see, not just, take the short-term easy step way of abstracting it.
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate so much with that, right? Because to me, it's about, crypto is about transparency and taking back control and power. And that involves taking responsibility of like taking care of your assets, holding your keys, verifying things, and like learning about how things work rather than just kind of like purely aping into stuff. And a lot of it is also in parallel, actually, with the whole internet part of democratizing as well, right? Because previously we were just basically consuming a lot of information from, I guess, printing
Yep.
press and so on. But internet made it such that everybody can blog, everybody can like set up social media and tweet. And now with crypto and DeFi, everybody can, well, essentially be our own bank, right? But of
Yep.
course, that's so hard. That's so hard. I mean, it's so much more complicated than expressing ideas, and I guess in a way the consequences are also much greater, right? I mean, you could get scammed, you could people put their life savings in. So how do we kind of strike that balance, right, between you know giving just people freedom versus kind of like doing so in a responsible way that they still not know what they're doing, right? But, I mean,
Yep.
it's the balance. Like for example, in the Zaps, you can't explain every single Zap and explain every single protocol and tell them what to
Yep.
do. But we still want to give them the option to use it. So how do we strike the balance?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I mean, it's like, if you're a parent and you hide your child from all the risks in life possible, sometimes they come out unprepared for all these new challenges. And I kind of see, you know, DeFi in the same way, where people coming in, if you gate them from all the risk possible, you're not, you know, we're anti-fragile systems, right? We can adapt, we can learn. And I think if we, regulate DeFi too much, or we uh, protect users from the risk too much, we're not building we're not basically leveraging, our anti-fragile system where we can actually learn from our mistakes. So I think DeFi is helping people. Like, I made a ton of mistakes that if in 2017, that if, DeFi was very regulated, or if, maybe centralized, exchanges with the best intentions just gated me from doing stuff, I probably wouldn't have learned these lessons and probably wouldn't be in the same place I am today. So I think there is a balance. I think for some things, it is important to protect people, but um, it's important not to like just box them and protect them from all the risks possible, because they exist. And sometimes it is important for people to make mistakes. I think it's just like, if you make a mistake and you lose all your life savings, that's very bad, right? So I mean, there is a balance to strike. If it's $1,000 when you're 24, I would, gladly take that lesson and learn from that. It's not going to change my life. For some people, it actually might, but yeah, it's tough. I think you just don't have to like isolate people from all the dangers in finance, because it's not going to help long term.
Yeah, and indeed, yeah, this is the kind of debate. This is the kind of the debate of our, I
Yep.
guess, zeitgeist, right? With like GameStop and all that kind of like, don't tell me what to invest in. Don't tell me about the fundamentals. I put in money where I want to put, and I put in however much I want to put in. And in a way, it is also a call for freedom. So very much kind of
Yep.
in the whole values of crypto. Although at the same time, while we are trying to say, parallels with Web 2, there's a whole, I mean, maybe I don't know whether a trap or parallel to be drawn between like Web 2 needing to kind of like suck engagement, right? Because
Yep.
often the business models are not there and you kind of need to, you don't pay and therefore they monetize your attention and your time. And I mean, at the risk of drawing some parallels to Zapper, right? Like, firstly, currently we don't have a business model yet, which I'm sure we're trying to think of something. And secondly, but at the same time, we are incentivizing engagement with the
Yep.
recent leveling up, right? Giving people the option to kind of log in and claim every day and exchange and pool and earn kind of incentives from that. But there's no kind of like guidance of, where should they direct this to, nor is there kind of a, like you said, there's no, we're not acting that as a role of parental thing to guide them to like
Hmm.
how much you should use or how much you should put in. So how do you think about this uh, monetization and
And
like engagement? Where is it going? Yeah.
yep. Yeah. So probably one of the questions we get asked the most often is like, how does Zapper make money? And yeah, I mean, to be clear, we don't make money yet. And I'll explain why. So we're a very, very young project. Not like, a year and a few months. And so for us, the number one thing is building the best product possible for, our users in our community. And to me, it's much harder to build a great product than finding a business model. And I think often people will be focused too much on figuring out a business model quickly. And sometimes it comes at either the expense of the users, the community, or the company, right? Or the DeFi protocol. So for us, yeah, really focused on growth. And we're trying to find like these, maybe we're trying too much, but we're trying to find creative models, right, that benefit everyone. Like Web2 brought new business models with advertisement. Obviously, we won't go that route. We never want to have advertisement on Zapper. But we're trying to find like what are these native Web3 models or stuff we can do in DeFi, right? We have this whole system, financial system that, just having like sitting cash idle, you're making money, you're making revenue. So are there things we can do that benefit everyone? So, like Yearn, right, there's a performance fee on the vaults. So we're just like looking at different ideas, but most likely would gear something to like a solution or a business model that's DeFi native, like most of the protocols. I think the future is there. That's where you can also align the incentives between the builders and the community. So most likely that's the route we go. In terms of when, it's hard to say. Probably sometime in the next year. And to your other question in terms of engagement, so last week we launched our gamification feature where you can earn levels by performing various tasks on Zapper. And I mean, for us, this is really just an onboarding feature. It's to make it easier for people coming into Zapper. Because right now, if you look at the barriers to entry in DeFi, often the, someone's likeliness to enter, DeFi will be related to their willingness to learn. And if it's too complicated and it far exceeds their willingness to learn, they won't enter. And we're seeing a lot of people like with that friction point. And so if we can come in and just make it more fun, by default, we're going to make it more accessible because, oh, okay, well, I can earn quests and I can mint some NFTs. And so just making that whole process, more accessible, more fun for people coming in. I think too, like finance doesn't have to be this boring. Like we can actually rewrite finance to be whatever we want it to be. And to me, it can be something fun because fun is relatable. It doesn't have to be like this, brown suit, brown socks thing. That's very boring and square. Actually, like I've been writing like this article on like the relationship between, trust and fun in traditional finance and why almost banks try to seem as unfun as possible, right? And it's really because of trust.
Uh-huh.
And, basically just summarizing it, right? DeFi, the trust element is handled by, the base layer Ethereum. And so a lot of DeFi projects are able to not focus that much on trust because it's all handled, like the custody is Ethereum, basically. So we're seeing a lot of projects kind of, try different things in terms of making their application more fun and engaging. But yeah, I mean, traditionally, you had to look very corporate, very safe, But if you look at the technology in the back, I wouldn't say it's particularly the safest thing possible, but it's really a game of appearances, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, really for us, just making the onboarding education more accessible and fun.
I like to joke about how funny it is that some of the leading protocols. There's a ghost with Aave. There's like a
Yeah,
unicorn with Uniswap. There's sushi. This meme that came out, and like with Zapper, it's like this whole lightning thing, and it's all like bright colors, this bright purple. And it's such a departure from supposedly older generation. You're like, what are you buying? I'm buying these sushi tokens. I'm buying this unicorn socks, and
yeah,
insane.
no, and I think too, like the younger generations, like I've been very disillusioned by traditional finance. Um, So we're kind of going at the other end of the spectrum because people are people don't want finance to be this, boring thing. They're actually actively looking for something that kind of sets itself apart.
That almost kind of defines the target user segment, right? Like, because when we're talking
Yep.
about younger generation, fun, self learning, curiosity, it's almost kind of like we're self selecting for groups that are they want to learn and take control of their kind of
Yep.
finances. Is what I'm really hearing from you. Does this kind of mean that we are not going consciously, not going after like institutions and companies and traditional finance, right? Are we kind of distancing ourselves in a way?
Yep. I mean, yeah, to me, the institution part of DeFi is not the most important part of DeFi. Uh, like I see a lot of people or institutions are coming to DeFi, and I couldn't care less because to me DeFi has never been about institutions coming. It's been about empowering individuals and allowing people to broadcast themselves financially. And the trend doesn't show that it's an institution game. It shows that it's actually people trying to participate, like you and me. And that's the trend at Zapper we want to focus on. Now, I'm not saying that institutions won't be in DeFi. There are some institutions coming into DeFi. They will come for sure. But to me, that's not the larger trend that's going to make DeFi important in the future.
All right, I think that's a good segue to then relating to what we're going to build to attract these people, right? So we know about some of the priorities coming up, namely, well, there's the mobile app. I'm sure there are like new features. I'm sure there are new protocols that are going to come up. What among these most excite you or are your highest priority right now?
Yeah, so there's a few different big priorities we're focusing on. So we have the mobile app, we have the app store, and yeah, the other thing I totally forgot. Yeah, we have lending, lending coming out as well. And first of all, I mean, the app is going to be this really, I mean, Zapper in a pocket type experience. There's not that much to add to it in the sense that it's going to be, everything that it can do on Zapper, you'll be able to do it from our apps. And then a big thing we're working on is our app store. And so for us at Zapper, one of the most, I'd say, time-consuming thing is building protocol integrations. And the App Store is simple. It's allowing builders to build on top of Zapper, their own protocol integration. So someone from SushiSwap could build the SushiSwap integration on top of Zapper. And for us, it's really about opening it up to the community and kind of building this ecosystem of developers. Because we know long term, like we won't be able to build all the protocol integrations. Like we're experiencing like an internet type explosion of websites or like protocols. And so for us to try to integrate all of them is, not the best investment long term. Short term, it is a good investment. It's good to do things that don't scale sometimes, but long term, we're gearing towards this app store where also as a user, right, you could go to Zapper, explore the app store and, be able to discover from a list of, community submitted apps, the ones you want to enable to your dashboard. Because, I mean, a dashboard is kind of like a personal experience. Like people will have their own use cases for DeFi, and it's important to be able to tailor that use case. Like the analogy we often make is like comparing it to your Shopify e-commerce website. You're able to browse through their apps, through their app store, and extend kind of like your shop to fit, your specific needs for your store. And so for Zapper, it's kind of a similar fashion, but for DeFi.
Yeah, this is such a kind of this idea of this app store and well more broadly decentralizing the value creation of this platform is I think so much in the spirit of DeFi, right? Where like when you were saying how it doesn't make sense for you to build everything, well, technically like that's what VCs are funding so many startups to do, right? Like they're funding them to build the super apps. If you don't have enough, if you can't do it, here, throw money at you, hire more people, build all these features, make it so much stickier. But what I'm hearing here, what we're trying to do is then why not let everybody like be a part of this movement and like, kind of take control and take up responsibility of actually building these apps in the app stores. Of course, then the parallel to then the whole Web 2 thing is then, then for example, how Apple curates its app store and takes a cut, or like game platforms like Steam, and like they benefit disproportionately. To a certain extent, like this could be where Zapper captures value, but at the same time, it also is a point where maybe we want to actively give away the power and decentralize Zapper, right? So do you think this is where we'll be heading? Like, how much control are we giving away of Zapper by allowing this app store to happen?
Yep. So without going too precisely on the subject, like the way we approach the app store is you could kind of see it one where it's the more centralized, right? Apple type or Shopify type experience, and the one is the most decentralized. And end of day for us, the best solution is the one that leverages the most network effects. And so we're actively looking at the decentralized route, into seeing, how could we build this self-sustaining network of developers and apps on the App Store. And also it's important to, there's the whole process of creation that you mentioned, right? Apple has, dictatorial power on the apps that go on the App Store. But for DeFi, right, there's the decentralized element. So if Zapper has, dictatorial power on the apps that go on, on the App Store, we're kind of rebuilding, traditional Web 2 systems. So we are, trying to find out different, community curation systems. The graph has something, to curate the subgraphs. And so there's a lot already that, we can take from DeFi and, incentives that have been built. But for us, going the decentralized route has always been about improving the product. So if we actually go to, a DAO or a token in the future, for us, it has to actually accelerate towards the mission of, making DeFi accessible and easy to use, and not come at the expense of our mission, right? A lot of tokens and DAOs out there will have the token as almost a product, but it's not interfacing well with, their own mission or their own product. It actually takes a lot of focus away from the product, and often these tokens or DAOs will die off. So for us, it's important to have the right system and make sure it actually makes the product better. And I think more teams should be thinking about the token, not just as a fundraising mechanism, because most teams are just thinking about it through that lens and be like, oh, we'll figure it out later, right? Which is fine, but you have to, best case scenario is it actually fits into your product as a core element and actually leverages network effects.
Exactly. Yeah, leverage the network effects, as you said. We actually wrote a piece about this, the tokenomics blueprint, and the concept behind it is that a token should not be viewed as the fundraising mechanism. In fact, if it's only the fundraising mechanism, it is probably negative overall for the whole project, detrimental to it. And instead, we should look at it as like mechanisms to coordinate value creation and to distribute value capture. And in that sense, kind of like crowdsource the energy and effort and mind share of like so many more people and harness that kind of like open source energy and then reward people for it. Of course, the prerequisite to do this is, of course, to have a community. And here, I think we'd like to just move to the community aspect of Zapper. I think a lot of people may not know because we're all on crypto Twitter and such. But then here with Asia DeFi Network, we are looking a lot in Asia. And Zapper actually has 2 full WeChat groups of like 500 or like hundreds of people. And they're so active. I must say, truly, I'm impressed. Like compared to actually many of the other projects, it is actually a community, and people are coming up with questions. And like, for example, the recent Learn features with like redeeming the NFTs and like signing the transactions to get the EXP. Yep. Some people are having problems, and they were answering it for each other, and they kind of like helping each other. I'm like, wow, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. So, how did we get here? What was your approach, and did we get lucky? Which part of it was conscious, or who can we thank?
Yeah, I, it's like my first reflex is to say, I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, it's really great to have a really passionate community. I think one element that probably played an important role is education. Um, because we've been investing a lot in education, we kind of build a strong relationship with our community. Because like we were there from, the day one to, today, and still helping them, answering their questions. I think we also had like a strong, uh, being always very strong on the support side. Like a lot of DeFi projects that I entered, or Discord when I was building DefiSnap, it was like, crickets, asking questions and not getting answers. And so for us, it's really important. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's very hard to pinpoint to like, we don't have a formula for it. Uh, I think in DeFi, as I said, we've kind of forgotten about supporting community and answering their questions quickly in an effective manner. And a lot of projects kind of like, oh, it's DeFi, they'll figure it out on our own. But it's still important to keep the human element right and help people. So I think that's one thing. I think too, yeah, I mean, it just makes me really happy to hear, that we have a great community. And, if one day, without going too much into detail, we actually go to a DAO, it's really important to have like, that strong, root of people participating without ever thinking we would have a token in the future or a DAO. They were there for the right reasons. They weren't rent seeking.
Hmm.
So that's the important part of the community, because when you just you launch a token, and then yeah, community will quickly form, but the community will be based on the premise of the token. It's based solely around the token, not necessarily on the product or education, or even bonds formed with the builders in the community itself. And so it makes it very artificial, so that when there's something bad that happens in the project, everyone will leave, right? So it's really important to yeah, focus on building those strong roots. But as I said, I don't have a formula. I probably can ask uh, Travis or Z. We're working a lot on their community and doing great work. What's the secret?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, sometimes secrets are stumbled upon. Many of the greatest discoveries and inventions were stumbled upon by accident. But to me, I have always had the opinion that while the core team always tries to decentralize control over the protocol and the curation and value creation, but one thing that is very difficult, or maybe should not be decentralized, at least in the beginning still, and for a sustained period of time, is shaping the culture of the community, right? As you said, right? What you're talking
Yeah,
about, education, making it easier for users, listening to them. These are the values in essence of Zapper, and helping them achieve what they want to do easily, right? Essentially, these values kind of like shape the communities that form around the product. And I can see it in some of the projects that basically did not issue tokens at the beginning, and like just allow the organic kind of values and community to build around, for a significant period of time before any potential kind of like DAO or decentralization
yep,
happens. Those tend to be a lot more powerful. It's kind of like you like, built it up, and then it kind of released the whole
yep.
pressure all at once.
Yeah, no, to me, that's a good point. And those communities are kind of like sleeping giants, right? Because they're communities that form with no premise of, uh, you know, having a token go up, because there is no token, there is no DAO. People that go there are actually there because they care about others in the community and they care about the product. And so when in the future there actually is that, potential DAO or token, well, it is a sleeping giant. And then you realize, the community comes in full force. Um, yeah, no, it's definitely a critical element in a DeFi project, and often overlooked. Like, you know, a lot of builders are fairly technical and they put aside the community building, but it is very important on the long term. It's harder to measure the impacts in the short term because you won't see them directly, but long term it compounds.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it's something that's so intangible that it's hard to kind of describe, right? Because I guess there's one question that I wanted to explore, which is then, as an aggregation layer or an aggregation platform, one-stop shop, right? How do we build like this sustainable, I guess, moat, competitive advantage barrier? Because you could very easily switch over to other dashboards, and personally I do too, right? Like I switch over, for example, to
Yep.
Xerion when I want to check the history, because there's a nice graph around, like, how much of the value goes up and down over time. Or I
Yep.
switch over to DBank to check out the rankings of the TVL, because they have their own calculations. But I still use Zapper as my default dashboard. But maybe we don't need to shut people out with moats. We kind of like attract people in with these community engagement and the values. How do you think about this?
Yeah, it's a good question because um, there was a talk that it reminds me of a talk that Balji did early like 2011, 2012, and it was talking about the cost of exit or exiting a product, exiting a country, and you know the best products tend to be in a space where the cost to exit is very low, right? Someone could easily leave Zapper and go to Xerion, and we have very little to kind of hold you in, right? And sometimes products will artificially make it harder to leave, but that's not necessarily, uh, helping build the strongest products. And I think the moat is overrated in DeFi uh, because even if liquidity is a moat for Aave, right? Well, I mean, people can still withdraw and put it on Compound. I think underlying all that, you know, all these numbers are backed by the community. The reason why Aave has so much money is because they have a great product, they have a great community, and it's not just the liquidity in itself that's just, creating this network effects. There's actually something underpinning that. And so to focus overly on the mode being like finding this formula, I don't think it's the best effort, right? Uh, Sometimes I think community becomes a mode in itself. Like just look at Sushi Swap and Uniswap, uh, even if you can argue, parts of one or the other product are better, people will even not even use another product because it's like a sports team almost. Um, and so, yeah, I definitely think the moat is very overrated in DeFi. I think the best moats are those that have this self-perpetual like wheel of like improving the product, like a good network effect. It's not like artificial lock-in. Like if you look at traditional finance or like fintech, there is a big cost to exit, and it's you could kind of argue it's imposed by regulation, right? If I go to Coinbase, I have to go through KYC. I have to, have some sort of activity that, I increase my limits. So you're less likely to exit the product because you had to do all these things to kind of get in there. So it's for you to exit to another product, it actually has to be much, much better to justify the cost of exiting. But in
Mm.
DeFi, it's just as easy as, disconnecting and connecting your wallet elsewhere. So in the end, it's really good for the DeFi user, right? Because it builds this very strong competition that, apps are facing. And like we love the competition with Xerion and DBank because we kind of all make each other better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to draw a parallel with some similar products, right, with the yield aggregators, I think initially we saw a lot of products try to implement this exit fee, right? When you take out a pool, then you get like taken out a certain amount from your initial investments. And very quickly, people just kind of that fallen out of popularity, and instead people are totally okay with you taking a performance fee. So
Yeah.
there's like a social consensus around kind of like building like a win-win situation, and like, yeah, if I win, you get a share of my whatever I get, right? And then rather than punishing you for like moving to my competitor, or moving around to different parts. And I think that is one of, I guess, the beautiful aspects of the Web3 community, or the social consensus, that,
Yep.
yeah, we all try to make it
Yeah.
better.
And yeah. And I remember like initially when we were first, raising money in Zapper last year, one of the questions I was asked the most is like, what is your moat? And it was always kind of like it almost kind of forced me to think about finding a formula or finding like this, doing like this chart and wheel effect is, oh, this is gonna, you know, builders are gonna do this, that's gonna build this like moat. And in the end, like I realized that this this is like artificial. Like building the best product possible is gonna be our moat, and focusing on, what people want is gonna be the moat. Um, and that's something I'd say like other founders out there is like put your energy like on the right things. Don't try to find a formula that's gonna like build you a moat. Like just build something that people will love to use and that people will want. Because if you figure that out, the moat will be much easier to find. But don't try to find a moat before you actually find the product that people want.
Yeah, it's kind of like the answer emerges from like building and listening in an
Yep.
iterative cycle. That's amazing. Well, I think we have a few minutes left, so maybe let's zoom out a little bit further, even, right? So rather than just on Zapper, what are your views on then crypto in general or DeFi, right? Like, where are we headed? Of course, we have NFTs, and Zapper is also integrating NFTs, and there are all these cross chains, scaling solutions. Institutions coming in. There's so many narratives that are coming in, right? What are you paying attention to, and what are you most excited about?
Yeah. Um, like definitely most of my focus is on DeFi. Well, I'd say DeFi NFTs. I think uh, in the short, medium term, DeFi will be the biggest use case for crypto.
Mhm.
Um, but if I think about like the future, I think people will be very wrong on whatever their predictions are on the future. Kind of always is, and it's
Yeah.
often way more unexpected and weird than we actually think. I still think right now we're like in the infancy stage of DeFi, where we're still looking at traditional finance and kind of porting it over to DeFi. We're still at like the horse carriage modeled, first cars modeled after the horse carriage phase. We're not building these really new type of products that can only live on DeFi. There are a few, but they're not, most use cases have been just, porting stuff over from traditional finance on DeFi. And I think long term, DeFi is definitely going to be much weirder, um, definitely going to be much more unexpected. I think NFTs will play a big part in DeFi in the future, because NFTs could really be anything, anything of value. And to me, DeFi is just this, communication system for how we communicate value. Like I could definitely see a future where I use a Pokemon card to get a loan. Um, and so I think the lines will get blurred in the future, uh, just by making it more accessible, right? If I think of, right, kids know how sometimes we'll trade complex financial derivatives without even noticing. Like they'll be like, oh, I'll buy, this Pokemon card in 2 weeks at this price. Things like that, that they're kind of trading a complex derivative that they would have no idea, and most people don't have any idea in traditional finance what that is. But I think that's the future we're kind of going to, just making that communication, that bandwidth simpler, with things of value, right? We all have things, like my time is something of value that I can share with the world. Other things that I own are things of value that I can share with the world. And I think we're slowly, um, going down this stack in terms of getting closer to like the source of what are these different things of value, and being able to like, uh, interfacing with other people around the world. Like when you think about it, finance, traditional finance is just abstractions upon abstractions of what at its core are, oh, this company can produce cars, which is useful for this. And,
Mm.
that's really the base. And so I think we're getting closer to that because the bandwidth is much larger. Um, but yeah, kind of a long-winded answer, but that's generally how I see. So I can't say to any specifics, but definitely it's going to
Mm.
be much weirder and unexpected than we think.
It's getting weirder. It's getting more fun. All the
Yep.
DeFi and NFT is going to blend together into one giant soup, and hopefully we get closer to the value creation, like you said, to the actual car
Yep.
making, so that we maybe disintermediate the institutions even further, where it's really about
Yep.
getting to the real value creation on the ground. Super
Yep.
exciting. Thanks so much, Seb. Well, I think is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Otherwise, we can wrap it up here.
No, that's it for me.
All right. Well, right before we go, do you want to just share, what are channels where people can go to, like Zapper, Twitter, yourself, your own Twitter, anything?
Yep. So, I mean, first of all, if you're not using Zapper, what are you doing? So you could head to zapper.fi, able to track your portfolio, invest in a bunch of different DeFi opportunities across multiple chains. You could head to our Discord. We're happy to help you if you have any questions. And also you can follow our Twitter account, which is Zapper_FI.
All right. Thank you so much again, Seb. This is such a great conversation. I really loved it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Yes. And, well, everyone, hope you enjoyed this episode of Web3 Native Podcast, and see you next time.